Right, we're certainly done in Baron, at least in terms of the story. I can't help feeling annoyed that Baron would set up to be the main villain faction for the entire game. Every nation in the world struggles in the face of their armies. The king is gathering the crystals that hold the magical balance of the world together, probably for nefarious reasons. But then it turns out that Golbez was actually the main villain. He has no real affiliations. The king was killed and replaced before we ever went through the opening sequence of the game. And now the nation of Baron is gonna just sit out all of the rest of the conflict. Because of course, the fate of the world has to rely on the actions of a small band of heroes. And it's not even like our team is all that proactive, we just are absolutely reactive. No plans for the future, really, just react to whatever the enemy happens to be doing at that particular point. Hell, far too many story beats of this game are just us trying to save Rosa. The enemy only needs one more crystal to get the full collection, and our priority is to save Cecile's love interest? It would be less annoying in the story if they gave her more of a personality, or let her bounce off of some of the other characters. Hell, she doesn't even bounce off of Cecile all that well. Ah well, at least some of the dialogue in town has changed since we cleared the castle. The world does feel more alive than things in the first 3 Final Fantasy games as far as I can tell. It's funny how much those little dances bring a smile on my face despite how limited the sprites are. It's one of the few bits of humor in a story that feels like it's trying to take itself way too seriously, and it's certainly failing considering my lack of reaction to the twins being turned to stone in that sacrifice play. Why do we need to have constantly such over-the-top means of losing previous team members? The only time we saw anybody leave because they chose to was when Rydia and Rosa were pulled away so we wouldn't have any magic users in the battle for Fabul. That was a bit shaky in terms of tactics, but at least nobody was kidnapped or quote-unquote killed there. Huh. Swote isn't a word that I typically see. Is that a typo or something? Hold on, let me check for a definition. Someone who studies far too hard. Huh. Well, that's easy to imagine from someone who's into astrology in a fantasy world. When you say anomalous activity, can you be more specific there? Are we talking some odd growths that don't belong up there? Maybe some trails of smoke coming from some random section of the moon? Huh. Turning red? Well, I suppose that's interesting. Those two moons are orbiting a little close to each other, at least that's what I think. It's not like we know how they generally float around. Hell, considering our usual camera angles in Final Fantasy games, it's really not all that relevant to whether we got 2 moons or no moons at all over a planet. Either way, I'm pretty sure we're gonna end up having to go to the moon before we're done with this game. Sure, we haven't seen any technology being good enough in this world for a rocket ship of some kind, but then the original Final Fantasy had us travel back in time to deal with a paradox caused by Garland constantly dying and coming back as Chaos in the past. It's also fairly obvious to say that we're gonna have to do something special with the well in this town as well. Was that reddish mass something that came from the moon? Or did it come from something else? Well, thankfully we're not dealing with any of those earthquakes right here and now. Probably because this location isn't really plot relevant just yet. Considering the game wanted to draw attention to the well, I'm sure that's going to change at some point. I probably should have stocked up more on these healing items. Lady, that's not a secret path, it's just another dance sequence. I'm sure we'll find the actual secret path at some point since, well, this isn't the kind of game that would just introduce something like, an underground area and then decide to do nothing with it. That's why I think we're going to be going to the moon later as well, but then I suppose the game tried to talk up the Devil's Path and that turned out to be nothing, so maybe they just didn't remove some things from the script after some rewrites or something. As a side note, sorry, I have no clue why I decided to talk to her again. For one thing, it's not like her dance actually did anything to open up a new path, and for another thing, it's not like this is the kind of game where there'd be a good amount of variation in character dialogue as you try to talk to them over and over again. Hell, considering the games that came before it, it's amazing there's as much dialogue as there is. Final Fantasy IV was a game that really got things rolling when it came to storytelling in role-player games. Sure, the story itself hasn't aged especially well. There were plenty of lessons learned over the decades, but it's still in many ways more fun for me to go through than several later games. I mean, you're still able to compete with more modern titles in your own damn series. You must have done something right, much less when a bunch of other franchises look to the framework that you started as the baseline for their own games. I was expecting to find some item in here, not naming way. I swear, definitely not a fan of the whole hidden item thing in this game. It just makes it all too easy to end up searching for nothing. As a side note, definitely like seeing the shadows of some fish in the water there. Sure, it's not all that many fish, but still, I always appreciate seeing little signs of the world being a little more alive somehow or another. It helps give me some more motivation to try to defend it as we keep pushing forward. Okay, looks like the Iron Gloves are certainly going to be an upgrade. Again, I really wish that the stores we go to gave me more of a sense that we're going to end up improving the gear we have. It feels more often than not like I'm just checking these things because other games sometimes give us something to buy. This game just makes that sort of diligence feel like a waste of time. Ah, well, it's not like we're really in all that much of a hurry anyway. We could waste this entire clip, and the world would still be in just as much or as little danger. Even if Golbez is all too close to gaining what he wants and Rosa has been his prisoner for a good chunk of the game. How much of my lack of urgency is my fault, and how much is the story's? It's hard to tell sometimes. I'm sorry to tell you this, kid, but ogres aren't well known for creating a whole lot of heroic stories other than the Shrek movies. Dwarves are just a hell of a lot more industrious and more likely to be viewed as at least adjacent to the hero. Yeah, feels like we've seen everything there is to find in this town. And it's not like there's anything plot relevant here just yet. The airship might have opened up the world in terms of where we can go at a given time, but the story itself is still pretty damn linear. And we certainly haven't seen anything that could count as a side quest just yet, that's for sure. Ah, well, I suppose exploring towns like this is its own kind of fun. It's a bit funny that Final Fantasy XIII in the future forgets that little aspect of role-player games, considering all the damn good entries in the series that came before it. But I suppose that's one of the things about Final Fantasy as a whole. This series is a lot more willing to experiment and try new things, and while some experiments are a bust, like Final Fantasy II's leveling system, sometimes when they throw random ideas at a wall, they end up stumbling onto gold. Not that I'm all that likely to stumble at this stage of the game, though. I'm blatantly using an online guide to figure out where to go next, which... I'm just not likely to do that sort of thing in the Pixel Remaster or 3D Remake, because those games actually give you a button that lets you open up an in-game map, whereas this game doesn't give you a map of any kind. Not when you're in the dungeons, and not when you're wandering around the world. It's a bit of an issue with games this old, I know, but I'm kind of annoyed that the PSP version of this game didn't decide to add in that bit of user convenience. The 3DS remake that became just plain the 3D remake, and the Pixel Remaster of this same damn game, gave you in-game maps. It's clearly something that Square Enix realized was a bit of a problem with some of their older titles. So why didn't they think to add maps either for the world exploration part of things, or the dungeons in this particular version of this game? I know, it's my fault for choosing to LP the PSP version, leaving the option open for me to possibly do the After Years and whatever comes between the main game and After Years when we're done with the main story. And I very much doubt I'm actually going to go through the After Years anyway, since every time I've tried, I've just not been drawn into it in terms of story, and it felt too much like an undercooked Shin Megami Tensei game. At least, Faces of the Moon wise, at least. Don't worry, we're explicitly not allowed to walk anywhere that someone else is standing at. It can get annoying when there's only one way forward and someone is blocking the path. Must be awkward to keep fortune items that are larger than the usual customers in this town. Hell, it's a bit ridiculous that they built the buildings and doors with the same sizes that a regular person would use in any other village. Granted, it probably would be a pain in the ass to make this town all that much different from the other ones we've gone through so far, limited memory space in the original game and all that, and I don't think it makes sense to completely redesign an area in the PSP or Pixel Remaster. The 3D remake could get away with it, however. It's actually kind of funny that I'm not a big fan of the story after the whole Leviathan thing, but I still like the overall game enough that I wouldn't have too much of a problem working on commentary for the remake of this game at some point. But Final Fantasy VI, something that people consider the best written in the franchise, just fails to pull me in enough to make me go from beginning to end. I wish I knew why. Huh. When I hear this tune, my thought is generally on chocobos, the yellow ostrich things in this franchise. Was this the first time this tune was used? Or did some earlier part of the series have it as well? Maybe 2 or 3? I haven't gone through those to completion. Oh, by the way, I suppose it's clever that the frog had a leapfrog moment in this dance routine. Yeah, I'm sure you three had a lot of fun with that. Bit of a shame that the sprite work in this game isn't good enough to let you guys show off much in the way of footwork or hip motions, though. Anyway, holy shit, we finally got into a town where we have a good amount of fresh equipment to switch to. Or at least stare at, rather greedily. all extremely expensive, but hey, I certainly have no objections. It's just been far too long since we've seen a store that gives us some legitimate upgrades for so many of our team. Kind of a shame that we can't see precisely how much our stats would improve if we put on mithril gear, but hey, he's got me grinning. Yeah, probably a better idea for a fresh sword for now. We can always come back to this town later when we have a lot more money to spend. Huh. So we're not allowed to sell the sword that has the myth written on it. Does that mean at some point someone is going to read that inscription and come up with a different interpretation, or that the sword will get an upgrade? Or is Cecile supposed to be emotionally attached to that blade, despite the fact that he's had it for less time than his original dark sword? I know, it's a major plot point, or at least the closest thing to a major plot point that the game can pull off consistently, but good God, they really should have done a better job of conveying that Cecile needed to switch from a Dark Knight to a Paladin. From what I can see, it's just not working. I'm a fan of show, don't tell, and that bit of plot very much felt like tell, don't show. Sure, our hero currently has more health and has healing magic at his disposal now, but it doesn't feel like anything amazing enough for me to buy the idea that Cecile would have stood no chance of victory as a Dark Knight if he just kept leveling up. It's not like Golbez had some measure of power or influence over Cecile. That seems to be happening to Kain for some reason or another. Specifically, it seems like Kain is being influenced because he has feelings for Rosa. That would probably have been more impactful if there was something about Rosa other than her being a medic and wearing skimpy clothing to draw someone in. Hell, I have not seen her bounce off of Cecile outside of the introductory bits of her when Cecile was still working for Baron. That scene in his bedroom showed that she's willing to give him some crap when he's feeling depressed and beating himself up. And the moment she heard he died, she went looking for him, not believing it. But after that, she hasn't been active in any way, shape, or form. When she was part of the team, she didn't really feel like she was adding much in terms of personality or drive to get things done. She just happened to come along for the ride until it was time for her to be kidnapped. Hell, come to think of it, it's a problem for pretty much every member of the team over the course of the game. Nobody really has much of a personal story arc that drives them forward. At best, Tella wants to avenge his daughter. Everyone else on the team at the moment just feels like they're along for the ride as we fight against the main villain. What? Why the hell would this guy say it's possible for him to equip a shield, and then when we get it, Cid's not actually letting us give him the frickin' shield? Ugh, that was definitely a waste of money, and based on what we could see in the store, it's not like we would have been able to tell that would happen beforehand. Anyone else getting the feeling that there are too many little tricks and traps in this game meant to catch out anyone who's playing it for the first time who happened to forget some details in a later playthrough? Because that just feels cheap as hell. At the very least, it feels like we've spent about as much as we're gonna be able to spend out here in this clip. Probably gonna leave town soon enough and head to whatever the next location is gonna be. Not really looking forward to it, though. The fact that we have to grab the 4th crystal for the sake of the villains in a hostage situation is dumb enough. But the game does so little with its characters that I honestly would not give a shit if we left Rosa in Golbez's hands and kept protecting the crystal as long as we could. Unfortunately, my vote in the matter doesn't matter. I'm not here to decide what our team's objectives are. All I can do is help our heroes get through the various situations between us and the next objective. You get used to that sort of thing, but it doesn't change how annoying that semi-agency can feel at times, especially when you don't agree with the team's present course of action. Ah well, if this clip hasn't been eventful in terms of plot advancement, we're certainly seeing plenty of locations here. Now, where the hell are we going to go from here? Dear God, if I didn't keep trying to look at an online map, then I'd be so lost. Guess we're back in Fabul for some reason. Kind of wish this nation had something to do. But no, after they lost their crystal in the plot-important battle, they're not going to be active outside of maybe a few moments of the game remembering that Yang came from here. The king is just going to keep on laying in bed, and the army of martial artists isn't going to bother using their training to protect or save the world. Right, of course I already rated those boxes. Why the hell did I think that I hadn't yet? Even if there was anything to grab from this earlier town, we don't have the money to buy any of it. I really don't know why I decided to come back to Fabul at this point. Sure, it's nice that the airship lets us go back to any town we've already been to before, but it's not like that means there's going to be new things happening in those previous locations, or that the people living there will have reacted all that much to the events that have been progressing. Anyway, looks like the next bit of raw footage is going to be short, so I'm going to include that in this clip and keep on pushing forward. Okay, so I'm coming back to the Mage Village. Why do I keep forgetting it's called Mysidia? Is it because it's all too close to the name Mist, which was a far more impactful plot location in my mind? I mean, sure, Mysidia is the place where the first crystal was taken before we actually started working with Cecile, and it's where we heard the myth that the world was going to be saved by a chosen one, who is most likely Cecile, and where we were told we needed to become a paladin just before that. But all of that pales in comparison to killing Rydia's mother and then burning her village to the ground in front of her, or witnessing the traumatized kid just absolutely rearrange the landscape in her righteous fury. Have I mentioned I wish the kid was still on the team? She hooked me into this story very well, and her being gone just feels like such a poor decision. It's not like any of the other characters have any real momentum or story potential going for them. Not even Tella. And he's the one with the burning, driving personal need to take Golbez down as far as I can tell. Cecile would probably just be content making sure Rosa is safe, then go through the motions of the rest of this conflict to save the world. Yang's been going through the motions since his own castle stopped being directly under attack. Seriously, it's amazing that there are so many characters in this game, and so few of them feel like they have anything to really push them onwards, as the world itself that they are living in is in danger. That sort of thing wasn't a problem in Final Fantasy 1 or 3, since the cast there was as undefined as it can get. Just a highly customizable crew that the player can do pretty much anything with, and have no personal stories of their own. Now, I know Final Fantasy II had some storytelling in it as well, but I've never been able to push myself to play it all that far in. The way you level up and get stronger in that game just made it tough to give a damn about any potential story there. Kinda feels wrong to come back to Myst without Rydia with us, but then it's not like any story beats happen here after that big one. Oh, we know the reasons, and it was the best bit of writing in the entire game. Really, it's a shame that the rest of the writing in this game can't manage to get to that level. Ah, well, they put the best moments at the start, and that's the sort of thing that gets people hooked to go through the entire experience. Certainly better than a game making things pretty underwhelming and dull for over a dozen hours, and then finally doing something to start gaining the audience interest quite a while after that. How deep underground are we talking? Deep enough that they're neighbors with the dwarves we heard mentioned in this clip? Or even deeper than that? Well, I suppose that's something we can afford with our depleted wallet, and it's no surprise that something that cheap would not be much benefit to anyone in our crew this far in. Anyway, apparently leaving the village by going right just had us exit on the village's left side. It kinda makes me wonder why the game bothered to give us multiple exits from a village if we always end up in the same place in the world map. Right, not seeing any landing zone there, and not with all those trees and mountains. The only landing zones lead us to nowhere. Ah, there we go. I'm sure those are going to be extensive. On second thought, yeah, let's save before doing anything else. Those are two pretty big locations, I assume, so not enough time left in this clip.